Now we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what Indians are all about.
I still say we Indian people are believers in the truth. This is the way of life that was given to your people. You're born an Indian, you're going to die an Indian. Indianness is a good life. You're facing an Indian this afternoon.
Good Saturday afternoon out there, everyone. Welcome to your number one source for Native American television news. It's Muskogee Vision. I am your host, Jason Salzman, here in the Muskogee Media Studios as we are prepared for this week's episode, and lots to get to, lots happening out there in Oklahoma, Creek Country, as well as the United States. The government shutdown now over 3 weeks, easily the longest government shutdown in American history now. And a lot of people in Indian country are talking about the government shutdown. What does it mean for tribes that have treaties with the United States of America that involve federal funding, whether that be for IHS or other programs or just to the tribal nations themselves? People have asked questions. We've even seen Congressman Mark Wayne Mullen from Oklahoma putting forth a bill that would guarantee the funding of IHS. We talked with Sean Terry, our Secretary of Health here at Muskogee Creek Nation, about just what the shutdown means for our health operations. After over 25 days and 3 weeks of frozen negotiations, the partial U.S. government shutdown is now the longest in the country's history. Muskogee Creek Nation Secretary of Health Sean Terry responded to citizen unrest on the issue with a statement assuring that MCN Health facilities would remain open. Muskogee Media recently sat with Terry as he went into further detail on how the tribe's health operations have prepared and are operating through the shutdown.
Well, we've had a lot of people concerned of whether the clinics and hospitals of the Muskogee Creek Nation Department of Health was going to close due to this partial government shutdown. And so I just wanted to spend a little bit of time reassuring everyone that we're going to remain open. Everyone is going to get paid with the exception of the commissioned corps officers that work in our facilities. And those commissioned officers, they are federal employees, and they do have to show up for work. They're just not going to get paid. So, as you may recall, last year, we started our Together We Can Do More campaign, which was really focused on us trying our best to improve our third-party collections with Medicare and Medicaid and private insurance. And we've moved from being about where we've collected 1.6, 1.7 a month to where now we're averaging over 5 to 6 million a month. It takes the Department of Health about $6 million a month to operate at our current standards. We spend roughly about $200,000 a day. And so with the operational efficiencies that we've achieved, we are carrying over probably about $15 million from the previous year, which leaves us reserves, cash reserves of about $15 million in the bank from 2018. And so with us bringing in $5 million a month, we should be good at least for the next year without having any problems at all. So hopefully this government shutdown's not going to last a long time. We think it'll be resolved relatively soon, but we're in a very good financial position that when things like this does happen, we can assure our citizens and our patients that the Muskogee Creek Nation Department of Health is going to remain open and taking care of our patients.
Terry also took a moment to explain how MCN Health utilizes federal funds.
The Muskogee Creek Nation Department of Health, we receive about half of our operating dollars from the federal government. So that comes through the Indian Health Service. The Indian Health Service gets its funding through the Department of Health and Human Services. So it's all part of a discretionary budget inside of the federal budget. So we rely on roughly about $56 million a year comes to the tribe in our annual funding agreement, which is just a fancier word for a contract that we have with Indian Health Service. So when we don't have that money, we're relying on our own third-party revenue or what we've saved to run our operations. So that's where about half of our money comes from. And so that's, I think, what a government shutdown means is that the discretionary spending inside the federal government, there's really two types of funding. There is the mandatory entitlement spending, which is like Medicare and Medicaid, the Department of Defense, and programs like Social Security. And then there's the discretionary side. And it just so happens that Indian Health Service is part of discretionary spending inside the federal government. So many of our people believe that Indian Health Service is an entitlement program, and it's not. It's a discretionary spending. So whenever the federal government shuts down or they have to cut discretionary spending, Indian Health Service is always affected by that. So that's why it's so important for us as a nation to do well when it comes to third-party revenue and Medicare and Medicaid and private insurance billing. Is as we do better with that, that brings in the revenue so that whenever our clinics do experience things like government shutdowns or reduction in spending, we don't have to lay people off or cut our budget.
And we're going to keep you up to date here at Muskogee Media on all things shutdown and what it means for Indian country. A lot of people out there affected by it, some more so than others. As you saw there, the government shutdown not really touching the health operations as it pertains to being open and functioning. I thought what was interesting there that Mr. Terry talked about was third-party collections being something that they can rely on to get them from point A to B. When we saw that it was third-party collections that was referenced in some of the troubles from health a couple of years ago. So at the time, from what they were saying then to what they're saying now, it looks like third-party collections might be a problem that was sort of solved within the health system. That'll be interesting to follow as those developments become available as well. So interesting to look at there. Another thing interesting to look at will be this coming week, the first time ever, the Okmulgee County High School Basketball Tournament comes to the Muskogee Dome. They had the bracket meeting recently, and I was there to film this.
We're only a couple weeks away from this year's Okmulgee County Basketball Tournament, and this is our first year to host, and today was the actual seeding meeting for the tournament where each school's coaches and superintendents get together and they discuss how each team is doing, and at that point they come together as a group and they decide how they're going to rank each team and seed them in the tournament. So they talk about both boys and girls teams and discuss records and how they've played so far, and then rank them 1 through 8 on each side. And at that point, the bracket's laid out. So today we get to see who's playing who and when. And so that's exciting. So now everyone who's coming to the tournament can know when to come watch their teams play. And today we get to host that, and we're excited to host the tournament here in a couple of weeks.
The facility is top notch. I came in and saw it in the infant stages when the new floor came in and the chairbacks weren't in yet. But coming in today, it's going to be a great. It's going to be a great atmosphere. The Brock obviously was a top-notch facility as well, but you had kind of a mingling of fans would sit by each other depending on when you got there, because that's the cool thing for the county. There's so many people that show up, and a lot of times fan bases from other schools stick around all day long, even though their teams aren't playing, just to see good quality Okmulgee County basketball. And having it in here, I think, is going to make it more of an atmosphere in which you'll have all the Beggs fans on one side sitting together, playing a Preston team on the other side, much like you would on a Tuesday or Friday night in regular season. But I think besides the facility being a great facility, and obviously you guys putting it on and doing a great job with that, I think a lot of people are going to be really pleased, and I know we are.
We'll start January 21st and run through the 26th. Games will start at 4 p.m. each day, and the championship game days will start at 5 on Friday and Saturday. We'll have plenty of parking here on site here at the Dome and the Omniplex here, and we'll have full concessions available. We have over 1,600 seats in our gym, so we have plenty of seating for everyone. So hopefully we'll have a full crowd each night, and looking forward to a smooth first year.
Our next story is one of the more special incidents we've had a chance to cover here in some time at Muskogee Media. Back probably 12, 13 years ago, James Nichols, the emergency management coordinator at Muskogee Creek Nation, was dismayed by an employee here at the tribe that had passed out and eventually passed away when several employees in his department weren't able to give CPR care, had certification, just wasn't comfortable enough to jump into action. That really bothered him, and it led James to basically start giving CPR classes around the tribe to different departments. He never thought or hoped even that one of his pupils in these classes would use this someday, but they just so happened to recently, and it just so happened to be a Muskogee Media reporter that was doing a radio show at the time the incident occurred. That led to Darren DeLon's hero story, but also CPR training at Muskogee Media.
I teach all through the year. On average, 2 or 3 classes a month. Sometimes it can be more than that. So, you know, throughout a year, if you averaged it out, probably, I don't know, we might get 600 or 700 people certified or recertified within the tribe or within our jurisdiction, because our department does go out and do CPR trainings for schools and things like that. So came today to Muskogee Media to teach CPR and first aid. Due to the fact that one of the employees actually had to use their CPR skills that they were taught here at Creek Nation during the incident.
We were coming back from our first break, and I noticed right before the intro, our guest was feeling dizzy, and eventually, he wasn't responsive. So we decided to, at that moment's time, we needed to get him on the ground and start doing CPR, administering that. At that moment, we were checking for responses, checking pulse, anything, no luck. So, chest compressions began. Eventually, after the chest compressions, he did come to, which was a shock. You want the training, but you just don't want, you hope it never happens, but when you do, you have to be ready. So that's what, I'm kind of glad James Nichols is doing something like this. So, we pray that something like that doesn't happen, but if it does and we're around, at least we know what to do and how to do it.
And we're joined in studio this Saturday with the man of the hour, the guy that was on the spot, Johnny on the spot, in this case, Darren on the spot, Mr. Darren DeLon. Darren, a reporter, a co-radio host with Muskogee Media. Thanks so much for being with us today, Darren.
Thank you for having me, Jay.
Now, this has got to be, for you, the minute you're hosting a radio show, like you said, you're coming back from your first break, it's just a regular Wednesday, then all of a sudden we got a situation on our hands. So I got to think that was just very stressful to, one, jump into action, but two, just kind of the whole normalcy of the situation is thrown off.
Exactly. You're thinking about, hey, we got to help this guy, but then two, you don't want to make any loud noises because you don't want to alert all the listeners to what's going on.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
what was scary, yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, you get away from the microphone, you get to the floor, you start administering CPR. thankfully, the gentleman is revived, and I think from what you understand and what you've been told, he's actually made a recovery.
Yeah, made a recovery. I know he was, from what I was told by the people at the language department, they kept me updated. He was in the hospital for observation. I'm gonna say for about 4 or 5 days, but made a full recovery and left there. They got him out, and he's doing pretty good from what I'm told.
And what a wonderful ending to something that could have been really way worse. And I think what's so interesting about the story is you saw there CPR training for Muskogee Media and everything like that, going through that. That's kind of where this journey started for you, was just in a CPR class that I'm sure the day that you took that CPR class, you didn't think, you're hoping you don't ever have to use it, but
Yeah.
just thank God you did take that class. But that was something that bore out of, if nobody had a chance to watch or see the Muskogee news story, the newspaper story that I actually wrote that about this whole thing that went down, and I thought it was interesting because James Nichols, who is in charge of emergency management and does the CPR trainings, that came from an incident back in 12 years ago, 13 years ago at Creek Nation, where we had an employee that unfortunately passed away, but there were people that didn't really know what to do around him at that time.
And people that were certified to do it.
Right.
It seemed like they froze up.
Right. And that really just stuck with James. It really bothered him, and he started wanting people to be more comfortable in situations, go in, explain emergency situations to people, so maybe that level of comfortability is there whenever it's time to jump into action. But I know for you, as you got everybody called and everything like that, I think that, was there a moment there where you got calm in the eye of that storm, or was it always just a stressful situation the whole way through?
I think as soon as we kind of had to lay the gentleman down, and I was checking for any signs of breathing, any responses whatsoever, I kind of had to calm myself down because I knew I had to count.
Yeah,
I knew I had to count those chest compressions,
Yeah.
so it helped out right there to be able to do that, be able to start counting.
Well, man, we're so thankful to have you. You do a great job here at Muskogee Media. One of the most popular columns in the newspaper with DeLon's Corner, and we're going to have more on that coming up on Muskogee Vision here in the coming weeks and everything like that. We're excited about it, but also just being there on the spot and being able to execute that. And I know that gentleman, not only is he, but his family also very grateful for your actions there, Darren. So thanks for being with us today to sort of explain that and kind of how everything went down. It was a Muskogee Media a Muskogee Radio Christmas miracle, as I called it in the newspaper. But what an incredible happening there.
Yeah, thanks again. Yeah, I'm just happy that it was for the positive. I'm glad he was. Glad he was being able to be revived and being able to make a full recovery.
Absolutely. Well, our next story will take us to the Muskogee Creek Nation District Courtroom, where they have satisfied the requirements of a law. The law basically said we'd like to have 3 respective judges for each division of the district court, but we only require 2. They now have 3. So that satisfies that preference to have 3 judges over family cases, civil cases, and criminal cases. And the newest district court judge was sworn in, and I was able to catch it on video and bring it to you guys here now.
For our purposes today, in that 1867 Constitution, we formally recognized a system of courts and were institutionalized in that document. So 150 years ago, in this Indian territories, we had created tribal courts, Muskogee courts, with juries, judges, attorneys, and elsewhere. In 1906, 1904, our tribal courts were abolished, our laws were held null and void, and that our chiefs were to be appointed by the president as opposed to elected. So democracy and a system of laws of well and fine for the Anglos in Washington, D.C., but when we had our own, that was not appropriate. However, the Muskogee Nation never gave up the belief that they had a right to our own system of laws and our own court systems, and continuously fought to regain that, sometimes filing lawsuits, sometimes advocating in more forceful ways, as some of you who may know Crazy Snake or Cheeto Harjo are familiar with in the early 1900s. So about the mid-1980s, these courts were resurrected. We have started out here in this building and have continuously been here. When the courts were started, we had about a third of this space. There, I think media at one point was over here to the left, and we were in the front part. But this has been a continuous effort that we have always fought to, and we've always been recognized as a point of attack from the outside. All this I say as background because as judges, this is something that we are, for the Muskogee Nation, that we need to be familiar with and aware of when we are sit on the bench. Many times, most of our stuff is no different than you would see in the state or federal courts as far as domestic violence issues or contracts, arrests, and so forth. And yet we never know when at some point something we take will be appealed into the federal court and they will attack the jurisdiction and sovereignty of the nation. So we are in fact in the front lines of the nation's right to continue to exist as an independent people. So I welcome this occasion. It's a joyous occasion to see this responsibility assumed by another member of our nation, Mr. Pittman. I'm very happy to have that his family is present and a few who work with the courts. And with that, I will have Mr. Pittman, if you want to come forward, and we will continue on. I, Jeremy T. Pittman.
I, Jeremy T. Pittman.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
Or affirm.
Or affirm.
That I will faithfully.
That I will faithfully.
Execute the office.
Execute the office.
Of District Trial Court Judge.
Of District Trial Court Judge.
Of the District Court.
Of the District Court.
Of the Muskogee Creek Nation.
Of the Muskogee Creek Nation.
And will.
And will.
To the best of my ability.
To the best of my ability.
Uphold the Constitution and the laws.
Uphold the Constitution and the laws.
Of the Muskogee Creek Nation.
Of the Muskogee Creek Nation.
Congratulations, Judge.
Thank you. I would just like to say a few words. I won't go near as long as Judge Bigler, but I'd like to thank the Chief for nominating me for this position, as well as the National Council for confirming my nomination. I've practiced in the nation's courts for over 10 years. I know how it works. I grew up just down the road here in Preston, Oklahoma, and came back and made my life here where I was raised. And I believe that I will make a good judge, and I will do my utmost to uphold the laws of the nation, as well as to present a fair and just court system, so that individuals know that they can come in here and feel like they are well represented and also receive a fair decision. Thank you.
Another development that's made news nationally is the signing into law from President Donald Trump amendments to the Stigler Act. In 1947, the Stigler Act basically was devised, and it contained some things that if you work in a realty department for a tribe, you know anybody that worked in a realty department from a tribe, or anybody that had to deal with tribal land into trust issues, you know that they had lots of problems with the Stigler Act, the way that it was. Amendments to the Stigler Act, mainly, the main focus these last few years has been the blood quantum requirement, which basically said if any heir that had title to those lands in question, any of those heirs went down to below a half blood quantum, then they would not be able to put those lands into trust, and they would not be tax exempt. So a lot of questions about the Stigler Act. The law being passed now removes that blood quantum requirement. We talked to Realty about those developments. The 5 civilized tribes that now reside in Oklahoma consist of the Cherokee Nation, Choctaw Nation, Chickasaw Nation, Muskogee Creek Nation, and Seminole Nation. Because these 5 tribes were conveyed their land pursuant to treaties with the United States government, each tribe had fee ownership of its Oklahoma lands. Due to this ownership, the allotment of the lands of the 5 tribes was by fee patent, signed by the chief or governor of the tribe in question, and restrictions on the land varied by the type of allotment, allottee's tribe, and the degree of Indian blood of the allottee. After allotment, the United States Congress passed laws, commonly referred to as the Stigler Act, that govern the transfer of the land to the descendants of the allottee. These lands are then referred to as restricted lands, and restricted status conveys several benefits of the landowner. Restricted lands are under tribal and federal jurisdiction and protection, and as such are not generally subject to ad valorem taxes, and in some cases, Oklahoma state income tax. Unfortunately, these lands lost restricted status once they passed to descendants with a blood quantum of less than 1/2. On December 31, 2018, President Donald Trump signed into law amendments to the Stigler Act that remove the blood quantum requirement and allow the restricted status of these lands to be maintained.
Well, we've been working on this, not myself personally, but our office has been working on this since the early 90s. This is the third time that it's gone through to Congress, and it was shot down one time in Senate, one time in House, and this time it actually passed. We've had a lot of families who have not probated because they know they're going to inherit in an unrestricted status, so they have not probated for generations, some families. So as far as our work, we're probably going to have a whole lot more probates that we're going to have to do. Hopefully by getting everybody's probates done and know who actually owns the land, we can have more economic possibilities such as leasing, things like that. As heirs probate these estates, because they are now understanding that the land won't become unrestricted, we're going to get marketable title, meaning we know who the owners are. We're not leasing presumptive owners. We're going to get good title for these oil and gas companies or even, business owners that want to lease the property. So we're going to have a lot of economic opportunity. We're going to have people who know what land they own, they have title to it, and they have good say-so on it. So if a court action has not been done by January 1st, 2019, then you move forward with those probates, etc. So people who think that they're going to get their land back from many, many years ago, that's not true, unfortunately. They may still own title to land, but it's not going to be restricted. This law applies only to the 5 civilized tribes. Like I had said earlier, now things have to go through state court, such as probates. Other tribes, they can go through their tribal court. Guardianships is another thing that has to go through state court. Other tribes don't have to do that. They can do those in their own tribal courts, and it's still that way with these amendments. The only thing that was addressed is the blood quantum issue. There's still some things that that we feel need to be addressed later.
All right, everybody, that's our show for this week. I want to thank everyone that had a big hand in this, including James Nichols, Darren DeLon for stopping in studio with me and talking about his tale of heroism. And then all kinds of thanks going out to Okmulgee County basketball tournament coming to Muskogee Dome. We're really excited about that. The good people at our realty department working hard with the new Stigler Act amendments. They're going to have lots of work on their hands. So keep with us here at MuskogeeMedia.com for developments on all these stories. And remember to go and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll see you guys next week.